She sent a sexy photo to the Mafia boss by mistake. What he did the next day shocked her. Before we dive into the story, tell me where in the world you're watching from. And if this story steals your heart, please hit subscribe. The flash of the bathroom mirror was unkind at 2 a.m, reflecting back a version of Isla that felt worn thin, like a favorite t-shirt washed too many times. She was 25, but exhaustion had settled into the soft ivory skin under her doe eyes, pulling them taut. Her apartment studio was a cramped walk-up, the air thick with the smell of darkroom chemicals and stale coffee, every surface covered in camera gear and stacks of invoices marked past due. Outside, the modern coastal city was asleep, its glass and steel financial district dark, its old-world Italian quarter quiet. Isla, however, was wide awake, stress-editing prep shots for the Verratti Foundation Gala, the single biggest client she had ever landed, a job that could either make her career or shatter it. Her strawberry blonde curls, usually vibrant, were pulled into a messy clip, and she worried the small scar on her lip from a childhood fall, a nervous habit. This gig was everything. It was rent for 3 months. It was finally paying off the loan for her best lens. It was, she feared, a terrible mistake. She was a junior photographer, used to shooting artisan bread for brunch menus, not the inner sanctum of the city's most powerful and elusive billionaire. Marco Verratti. The name alone was whispered in boardrooms and back alleys. He was the CEO of a luxury conglomerate that seemed to own half the coastline, but everyone knew the Verratti name was old, steeped in Italian tradition and shadows, his power extending far beyond the stock market. Isla had only seen him in press photos, early 30s, bespoke charcoal suits that fit his broad shoulders like armor, a clean fade, and cool gray eyes that seemed to read a room like a ledger. Tomorrow she had to shoot him, his foundation, his world. She felt like a fraud, a thrift store kid in her oversized blazer and worn white sneakers, clutching her camera like a shield. She needed confidence. She needed, just for a second, to feel like someone who belonged in that world. She looked at her reflection, at the worn black jeans and the simple tank top she wore under the blazer. On impulse, she unbuttoned the blazer, revealing the delicate black lace of the bra she'd bought on clearance, the one she saved for feeling brave. She practiced a look. Not a smile, but an expression of control. I am not intimidated. I am an artist. I belong. She lifted her cracked screen burner phone, a cheap necessity after her last smartphone drowned in a rainstorm, and snapped a mirror selfie. The angle was good. The low light caught the curve of her collarbone and the soft shadow of the lace. It was sultry, confident, a little dangerous. It was everything she was not. Smiling at the illusion, she opened her messaging app to send it to her best friend, Mara, with the caption, "Channeling my inner gala boss." But her thumb was numb from gripping her editing mouse, and the cracked screen was notoriously unreliable. She typed M, clicked the first name, hit send, and set the phone down. A beat later, it chimed. She glanced at it. The read receipt was green, but the name at the top was not Mara. It was M. Verratti, gala client. Isla's blood did not just run cold, it evaporated. Her stomach dropped into the worn sneakers she hadn't bothered to take off, leaving a cavity of pure, paralyzing ice in her chest. She stared at the screen, at the small, damning word, read. She had just sent a sultry, lace-clad selfie to the ruthless Italian CEO whose gala she was shooting in less than 24 hours. She backed away from the counter, her hand over her mouth, a strangled noise caught in her throat. This was not a mistake. This was career suicide. This was personal annihilation. He would fire her. He would blacklist her. He was Marco Verratti. He could probably have her legally erased. She sank onto her unmade bed, the smell of developer chemicals clinging to her, and watched the digital clock on her nightstand click to 2:17 a.m., the silence of her tiny apartment amplifying the sound of her world ending. She squeezed the delicate emerald locket she always wore, a worn piece of her mother, but even its familiar comfort felt useless against the tidal wave of modern horror that had just consumed her. Sleep was not a possibility. Isla spent the next few hours vibrating with a toxic cocktail of adrenaline and dread, alternating between frantically searching for a way to unsend the message, which was impossible, and drafting dozens of agonizing, unsent apologies in her head. "Mr. Verratti, I am profoundly sorry. It was an accident. Mr. Verratti, my phone malfunctioned. Mr. Verratti, I am a professional. Please believe me." Each one sounded more pathetic and guiltier than the last. By the time the watery gray light of dawn filtered through her dusty windows, she had accepted her fate. She was fired. She was ruined. She took a shower, the water scalding, and put on her best interview clothes, which were just her usual black jeans, a clean white shirt, and the same oversized blazer. She was loading her camera gear into its bags, preparing to call the foundation and preemptively quit when she heard the sound. It was a low, throaty rumble, an engine so deep and powerful it vibrated through the floorboards of her third-floor walk-up. She peered through the blinds. Parked on her graffiti-lined street, looking utterly alien and predatory, was a gleaming black Maserati Quattroporte. It had no plates, just a dark tint that seemed to drink the morning light. As she watched, a man emerged from the driver's side. He was not Marco Verratti, but he was cut from the same cloth. Tall, built, wearing a suit so black it looked like a shadow, with an earpiece tucked into one ear. He checked the building number, then looked directly up at her window as if he knew she was watching. Isla flinched back. A moment later, a sharp, authoritative knock echoed through her apartment. She opened the door on shaking legs. The man, Luca, did not smile. His eyes scanned her, then her apartment, a quick, dismissive inventory. "Isla," he stated. It was not a question. He handed her a thick, heavy stock envelope, sealed with a black wax 5. Her fingers fumbled with the seal. Inside were 2 items. The first was her revised temporary contract for the gala. She scanned the numbers and her vision blurred. The rate was not just good, it was triple what she had quoted. It was life-changing money. The second item was a single piece of black cardstock, heavy as slate. On it, in sharp, angular silver ink, was a handwritten message. It was not a termination. It was not a threat. It was perhaps something worse. It read, "Lunch, noon. Il Corvo." Isla's breath hitched. Il Corvo, the Raven. It was a members-only restaurant in the old quarter, a fortress of brick and ivy where phones were rumored to be surrendered at the door, where deals were made that never saw a courtroom, and where men like Marco Verratti conducted business. He had seen the photo. He had not fired her. He had tripled her pay. And now he was summoning her. Isla knew, with a certainty that chilled her more than the earlier panic, that she was not going to lunch. She was going to an execution, or perhaps an auction, and she was the only thing on the menu. The taxi dropped Isla a block away from Il Corvo, as if the driver knew better than to stop directly in front. The restaurant presented an unassuming facade of ancient brick and thick, dark ivy, nestled in the heart of the old-world Italian quarter. There was no sign, only a heavy oak door with an iron grill. Isla stood there for a long moment, clutching her camera bag like a shield, the delicate emerald locket at her throat feeling cold against her skin. She had worn her oversized blazer, black jeans, and worn white sneakers, a uniform that suddenly felt like a child's costume. Taking a shaky breath, she pushed the door. It didn't budge. A moment later, the grill slid open, and a pair of eyes regarded her before the door was opened by a man in a severe black suit. "Name," he said, his voice flat. "Isla, for Mr. Verratti." The man nodded once, as if expecting her, and stepped aside. The interior was dark, opulent, and silent. The air smelled of old leather, cigar smoke, and something rich and savory. It was a place of ghosts and power. "Your phone, signorina," the host said, holding out a velvet-lined tray. Isla hesitated, her gaze dropping to her burner phone. The host's eyes flickered to the cracked screen with faint, professional disdain. Swallowing her pride, Isla placed the cheap plastic device on the tray, where it looked pathetic next to the implied gold and steel of other patrons. She was led through a dining room of hushed conversations and shadowed booths, where men in bespoke suits and women with old-world pearls paused their meals to watch her pass. She was an anomaly, a splash of thrift store chic in a sea of generational wealth. She was led to a private dining room at the back, where a single window overlooked a secluded courtyard garden. Marco Verratti was already there, standing by the window, his back to her. He was taller than his photos suggested, his broad shoulders filling out the charcoal bespoke suit perfectly. As if sensing her arrival, he turned. Isla's rehearsed apologies died in her throat. His cool gray eyes, the color of wet slate, moved over her from her messy strawberry blonde curls down to her sneakers. It was not a leer. It was an assessment, clinical and complete, reading her like a ledger, just as the rumors said. A sleeve tattoo, intricate and dark, peeked out from the cuff of his stark white shirt, disappearing under the sleeve. He was clean-shaven save for trimmed stubble that highlighted a strong jaw, and his presence saturated the small room, making the air thick and hard to breathe. "Sit," he said. His voice was low, controlled, with a faint, cultured Italian accent. It was not a request. Isla sat, perching on the edge of the heavy chair, her hands clenched in her lap. He took the seat opposite her. A waiter appeared soundlessly, poured still water into 2 glasses, and disappeared. The silence stretched, amplified by the heavy damask curtains and the thick carpet. Marco Verratti just watched her, his expression unreadable, his hands resting on the table, onyx cufflinks gleaming. Finally, just as Isla thought she might pass out from the tension, he reached into his jacket pocket. He produced her burner phone and slid it across the polished antique table. The screen was lit, unlocked, and open, to her photo. The black lace, the bare shoulder, the look of misplaced confidence. Isla winced, heat flooding her face. "Mr. Verratti," she began, her voice a reedy whisper. "I am so sorry. It was a mistake. I was sending it to a friend, my thumb slipped. The screen is cracked. I would never, ever." Raised one hand, a simple, economical gesture that silenced her more effectively than a shout. "I know," he said. He tapped the contact name on her phone. "Mara, your friend, you were messaging her 2 minutes prior. This," he tapped his own name, "was an error of proximity in your contacts. It is understandable." Isla stared. He wasn't angry. He wasn't disgusted. He had analyzed the data. He leaned forward slightly, and the sheer force of his focus made her press back into her chair. "The question, Isla, is not what you sent. The question is why." Isla blinked, confused. Why, he continued, his voice dropping. "Does a photographer with your eye feel the need to rehearse?" He gestured to the phone. "This is a rehearsal, for confidence. You do not believe you belong at my gala." It was so accurate, so surgically precise that she felt exposed all over again, but in a different way. Before she could respond, he turned his own tablet toward her. It was open to her professional portfolio, the one she had submitted with her bid. "You are talented," he stated, as if discussing a stock price. "Your composition is intuitive, your use of light is dynamic, but you are hiding." He tapped a photo she'd taken of a chef. "Here, you shot him from across the room. You used a zoom lens. You were afraid to enter his space. You shot around him." He swiped to another, a candid of a musician. "Here, you caught the moment, but from the shadows. You are acting like a thief when you should be acting like an owner." His gray eyes met hers, and they were utterly devoid of warmth, yet intensely focused. "You are shooting my gala. You will not hide. You will not shoot from the shadows." Isla's mind was reeling. This was not a dressing down. It was a critique, a terrifying, high-stakes performance review. "The contract," he said, gesturing to the envelope she still clutched, "is valid. The new rate stands. I do not pay for mediocrity, and I do not tolerate thieves, but I am adding a condition." He folded his hands, the onyx cufflinks stark against the white table linen. "You are no longer just shooting the event. You are now my personal photographer for the evening. You will have unrestricted access. Backstage, my private lounge, the donor reception. Wherever I am, you will have clearance. You will shoot what I tell you to shoot, and you will get the shots that others are too afraid to take. Understood?" She could only nod, her throat dry. He was taking her mistake, her moment of profound humiliation, and twisting it. He wasn't leveraging it for anything indecent as she had feared. He was leveraging it for work, for control. He was protecting his asset, and in doing so, he had just claimed ownership of her, at least for the duration of the gala. He saw her talent, and he intended to wring every drop of it out for his own purposes. "Good," he said. He pushed her phone back toward her. The photo was still on the screen. He hadn't closed it. It was a silent reminder of what he knew, of the power he held. "My driver will take you to retrieve your equipment. You will be escorted to the museum for advanced setup. You will answer to no one but me." He stood, the motion fluid and final. The meeting was over. He hadn't touched his water. He hadn't offered her food. He had simply dissected her, redefined the terms of her employment, and dismissed her. Isla picked up her burner phone, the screen still mocking her, and followed him out, her worn white sneakers silent on the plush carpet, feeling less like a photographer and more like a carefully acquired, very fragile weapon. The days leading up to the Verratti Foundation Gala were a blur of controlled chaos. Isla found herself operating in a new reality, one defined by the invisible but immense gravity of Marco Verratti. Her access, previously limited, was now absolute. Gala coordinators who had dismissed her days before now scurried to fulfill her lighting requests. Museum curators offered her private tour. It was dizzying, but it was also isolating. She was marked. She was his. The new equipment arrived at her studio in heavy-duty aluminum cases, delivered by the same silent driver, Luca. It was not on loan, as she'd first assumed. The invoice was marked paid in full, Verratti Acquisitions. He hadn't loaned her gear, he had bought it for her. It was a breathtaking display of power, a velvet glove tightening its grip. She was being equipped, molded, and aimed. Her ex-boss, Julian, found her during a lighting test in the museum's main hall. Julian was a man who thrived on proximity to power, a mediocre photographer who had built a small agency by stealing the work of his junior hires, including some of Isla's. He was oily and resentful, his smile never reaching his eyes. "Isla, darling," he oozed, sliding up to her. "Quite the coup landing Verratti. I must say I'm surprised. He usually goes for, well, more established talent." Isla stiffened, adjusting the tripod, her back to him. "I was a good fit for the project, Julian." He laughed, a wet, unpleasant sound. "Oh, I'm sure you fit just fine. We all know how these things work. Just be careful. Men like Verratti, they don't just pay for photos, they buy the photographer, and they dispose of them just as easily when they're done." The threat hung in the air, thick and toxic. "Leave me alone, Julian. I'm working." He leaned closer, his voice dropping. "I know people on the gala committee, people who would be very interested to know what kind of services you offered to get this gig. It would be a shame if your credentials were suddenly revoked." Before Isla could respond, a low voice cut through the air. "Is there a problem here?" Luca, Marco's driver in shadow, had materialized at the edge of the hall. He was not in his driver's uniform, but a simple dark shirt and trousers that did nothing to hide the fact that he was built like a heavyweight boxer. Julian's bravado vanished instantly, replaced by a pasty film of sweat. No problem at all, just congratulating an old colleague." Luca's eyes were flat. "Mr. Verratti prefers his assets to be left undisturbed. You should leave. Now." Julian scuttled away, casting one last venomous look at Isla. Luca simply watched him go, then turned to Isla. "Mr. Verratti was concerned about Mr. Julian's reputation. My team investigated. He was attempting to plant fabricated text messages on the event server, implying an inappropriate relationship between you and him to have you removed." Isla felt sick. What did you do?" Luca's expression did not change. "We handled it. The attempt failed, but Mr. Verratti is displeased by the complication. He requires you at the penthouse. Immediately." The penthouse was a fortress of glass and steel, occupying the entire top floor of the Verratti Tower, with a sea view terrace that seemed to float above the city. The minimalist interior was all cool gray marble, black leather, and sharp lines. There was no clutter, no personal photos, only priceless modern art that looked more like an investment than a passion. Marco was on the terrace when she arrived, a phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid, clipped Italian. He gestured for her to wait, his back to her. Isla stood in the vast living room, feeling small and out of place, her camera bag at her feet. He finished his call and turned, his gray eyes sweeping over her. He had shed his suit jacket, and his white shirt was rolled up to the elbows, revealing the intricate ink of his sleeve tattoo. "Julian is a parasite," he stated, walking inside. "And parasites attract larger predators." "I can handle him," Isla said, though her voice wavered. "No," Marco replied curtly. "You cannot. This is no longer about a jealous ex-boss. My security team intercepted communication between Julian and a representative for the Savello family." Isla knew the name. The Savellos were old rivals of the Verrattis, a competing family that ran the city's shipping yards, and it was rumored, far less savory enterprises. "They want to embarrass me at the gala. It is my name on the foundation." "A public scandal, a disruption. It weakens my position. Julian was their way in, and you," his gaze pinned her, "are the vector." Isla flinched. "A vector? You are an unknown quantity. You are vulnerable. They see Julian's anger as an opportunity to create chaos. He fails, so now they will try something else, likely targeting you to disrupt the event." He stopped in front of her. "This is, as you Americans say, a pain in the ass. Therefore, you will stay here until after the gala." Isla's jaw dropped. "Stay here, in your apartment? Absolutely not. I can't. This is not a negotiation, Isla. It is a security protocol. You are a liability. I am managing my liability." Isla's jaw dropped. "Stay here, in your apartment? Absolutely not. I can't. This is not a negotiation, Isla. It is a security protocol. You are a liability. I am managing my liability." He gestured to a hallway. "Luca will show you to the guest suite." It is purely business. You will be safe here, and my event will be secure. You will not leave this penthouse without Luca." She was a prisoner. A very well-paid, well-equipped prisoner in a gilded cage. She wanted to scream, to throw her camera at his head, but the cold finality in his eyes told her it was useless. He had decided. And when Marco Verratti decided something, the world rearranged itself to match. The gala itself was a surreal experience. Isla moved through the glittering crowds, a ghost in her simple black dress, the camera her only shield. But she was not a ghost. She was his ghost. Security parted for her. Velvet ropes were unclipped. She was invisible and all-powerful at once. Empowered by his strange, suffocating protection and fueled by a confusing mix of resentment and gratitude, she took the best photographs of her life. She didn't hide. She got close. She captured the flicker of boredom in a billionaire's eye, the tension in a politician's handshake, the genuine wonder of a child viewing the art. And she shot Marco. She caught him in motion, a predator in a tuxedo, his cool gray eyes scanning the room, his control absolute. She captured a rare, unguarded moment when he listened to an elderly art patron, a flicker of genuine respect softening his harsh features. Later, long after the guests had departed, they stood on his penthouse terrace. The air was cool, smelling of salt from the harbor. Below, the city glittered. Fireworks, the finale of the gala, painted the sky in splashes of emerald and ruby. They were both exhausted. He had undone his bow tie and she had kicked off her painful shoes. "The photos were effective," he said, his voice quiet. "You did not hide." "You didn't give me much choice," she replied, her voice sharper than she intended. He turned to her, a faint smile touching his lips for the first time. "No, I did not." His gaze dropped to the emerald locket at her throat, which she was nervously fingering. "That is old," he observed. "It was my mother's," Isla said, her hand closing around it. "She was an artist, a painter. She always told me to see the world for what it was, not what I wanted it to be." Marco was silent for a long time, watching the fireworks burst over the water. "My grandfather," he said, his voice introspective, "taught me to see value, not just cost. He was a stone mason in the old country. He could look at a raw block of marble and see the statue inside. He said most people only see the rock." He looked at her, and the mask of the CEO, the capo, slipped. She saw the man beneath the myth, disciplined, focused, and profoundly lonely. "I kept the photograph, Isla," he admitted, his voice so low she barely heard him over the explosions. "Not as leverage, not as a trophy." He paused, searching for the word. "I kept it as a reminder that courage isn't always a noisy thing. Sometimes it is just practicing in a mirror at 2 a.m. He raised his hand, and before she could react, his thumb brushed the small, pale scar on her lip. The touch was electric, a jolt that went straight to her core. It was brief, impossibly gentle, and it shattered the last of their professional pretense. "You should get some rest," he murmured, pulling his hand back as if burned. But his gray eyes were no longer cool slate. They were a storm. The high of the gala, the fragile electric truce on the terrace, was shattered by the harsh light of morning. Isla woke in the guest suite, the sheets impossibly soft, to the sound of a phone buzzing. Not hers, but Marco's, from the main living area. She heard his low, clipped voice, the rapid-fire Italian sharper, angrier than she had ever heard it. A cold knot of dread formed in her stomach. She dressed quickly in her clothes from the night before and padded barefoot into the living room. He was standing in front of the wall of windows, his back rigid, staring at the sea. He ended the call with a sharp word and turned. The controlled mask was back, but underneath it she saw a glacial rage. "What is it?" Isla asked, her voice small. He didn't speak. He simply picked up his tablet from the marble coffee table and handed it to her. It was open to a sleazy tabloid blog, the kind that specialized in celebrity scandal and financial gossip. The headline was explosive. "Exclusive, VERRATTI CEO BUIS gala photographer with contracts. See the photo she sent to seal the deal." And there it was, her photo, the mirror selfie. The black lace, the confident look, plastered across the internet. But it was worse. Julian, in an act of venomous revenge, had not only leaked the photo but had attached a fake timestamp, dating it before she was awarded the contract. He had fabricated an entire narrative, complete with anonymous sources from the gala committee, painting her as a calculating seductress who had slept her way into the job. Isla felt the blood drain from her face. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No, he faked this. The timestamp is wrong. I sent it after I had the contract. It was an accident." Marco took the tablet from her numb fingers. I know, he said, his voice flat, dangerously calm. Julian was sloppy, but the damage is done. His phone began to ring again. He glanced at it, his jaw tightening. The museum board, sponsors for the children's wing, are threatening to pull funding. The Savello family is, of course, releasing a statement expressing their deep concern for the integrity of the city's charitable foundations. They are using this. They are using you. He paced the room, a caged panther. I'm being blacklisted, Isla whispered, staring at her own phone, which was now lighting up with dozens of notifications, hateful comments, and rescinded offers from minor clients. Her career was over. Julian had won. He had destroyed her. But as she looked at Marco, at the rigid control in his shoulders, she realized Julian hadn't just destroyed her. He had hurt him. He had landed a blow against the untouchable Marco Verratti, staining his pristine CEO image, threatening his foundation, and giving his enemies ammunition. She had become his liability, just as he'd said. She was the vector, and the infection was spreading. I have to fix this, she said, her voice shaking but gaining a sliver of resolve. I'll release a statement. I'll show them the real timestamp on my phone. Marco stopped packing. And they will say you fabricated it. They will say I fabricated it. You are an unknown. I am not. In this narrative, you are the whore and I am the corrupt billionaire. It is simple and people will believe it. Isla looked at him, really looked at him. The man who had seen her talent, who had given her a chance, who had in his own cold, controlling way protected her. And she had brought this firestorm to his door. No, she said, her voice firming. I won't be your liability. She walked past him, back to the guest suite, and grabbed her small duffel bag and her camera case. She returned to the living room, her worn sneakers on, her blazer straightened. She walked to the kitchen counter and placed her cracked screen burner phone on the marble. The original file is on there, she said, her voice clear. The real timestamp, the metadata, everything, you can use it. Or not, but I won't stay here. I won't be the weapon they use against you. I won't drag you down. He watched her, his gray eyes unreadable, the muscle in his jaw ticking. He looked powerful and for the first time cornered. Running will not fix this, Isla. Maybe not, she said, slinging her camera bag over her shoulder. But it's the only thing I have left to do. It's my choice. You can't control this one. She expected him to stop her, to command her to stay, to lock her in. But he didn't. He just stood there, a statue of rage and discipline, and watched her. She walked to the private elevator, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was terrified. She was walking away from the most powerful man she had ever met, the only man who had ever truly seen her, and she was walking back to her tiny, broke, and now ruined life. But as the elevator doors whispered shut, sealing her off from his world of glass and steel, she felt a strange, cold sense of freedom. She had at least taken back her own story, even if it was just to end it. Isla hid. She returned to her cramped studio, unplugged her internet router, and silenced her phone, burying it in a drawer. The world went silent, but the silence was heavy, suffocating. She was a pariah. She sat on her floor, surrounded by the expensive camera gear he had bought her, which now felt like a gilded cage she had escaped. Her career was over before it had truly begun. Julian had won. She waited for the other shoe to drop, a lawsuit from the Verratti legal team, a formal termination of her now useless contract, perhaps even a threat. But there was nothing. Just silence. For 24 hours, she existed in a state of suspended animation, the city outside her window continuing on, oblivious to the fact that her life had imploded. The next afternoon, her laptop, which she had forgotten was still connected to her neighbor's spotty, unsecured Wi-Fi, pinged. It was an email, not from a lawyer, but from the Verratti Foundation's Public Relations Department. It was a link to a live stream. Unscheduled press conference, Verratti conglomerate. Her heart seized. This was it. He was going to publicly sever ties, denounce her, cut his losses. Her hand trembled as she clicked the link. The stream flickered to life. Marco Verratti. He was at a podium, in front of a backdrop of his company's logo, flanked by flags. He looked immaculate, his charcoal suit perfect, his expression composed, his cool gray eyes sweeping over the assembled press. He was the image of untouchable corporate power. A journalist, a sharp woman from a major financial paper, asked the first question. Mr. Verratti, your foundation is facing sponsor withdrawals over allegations of impropriety involving a gala photographer, Ms. Isla. Marco held up a hand, silencing her. Thank you. Let me be clear. His voice was amplified by the microphones, low and controlled, filling the room. The Verratti Foundation's gala was the most successful fundraising event in its history. We raised a record $34 million for the children's art program. He gestured to a large screen where one of Isla's photos flashed, a stunning, emotional candid of a child viewing a painting. This success, he continued, is due in large part to the extraordinary, professional, and bold work of our lead photographer, Ms. Isla. Her images did not just capture the event, they captured its soul. She is a rare talent. Isla's breath caught. He wasn't firing her. He was praising her. Another reporter shouted, "But what about the allegations, Mr. Verratti? The photo?" "Ah, yes, the photo," Marco said, his expression unchanged. "The scandal. It is true that there are new forces at play in my foundation, which is why I am announcing today that I have signed Ms. Isla to an exclusive, salaried contract as the official chief photographer for the entire Verratti Cultural Foundation. Her talent deserves a global stage, and we intend to provide it." The room exploded in a flurry of questions. Isla stared at the screen, her mind unable to process. He wasn't just not firing her, he was hearing her. Publicly, defiantly. The first journalist pressed again. "Sir, that doesn't address the photo. The blogs claim she seduced you for the job." Marco's gaze settled on the journalist, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. He reached into his pocket, but he didn't pull out his own sleek smartphone. He pulled out Isla's cheap, crack-screen burner phone. He held it up for the cameras to see. "This," he said, "is Ms. Isla's phone, and on it is the truth." He pressed a button. It was not the photo. It was an audio file. Julian's voice, oily and bragging, filled the room. "So I leaked the pic, faked the timestamp. Easy, the little tramp is finished. And Verratti, he looks like a fool. The Savellos paid me 10 grand just for the humiliation." The audio clicked off. The room was utterly silent. Marco Verratti placed the burner phone on the podium. "My legal team is currently handling Mr. Julian's defamation and fraud. My security team," his eyes found a specific camera, a silent message to his rivals, "is handling the outside interference." He leaned forward. "Let this be my final word on the matter. I do not tolerate incompetence, I do not tolerate liars, and I protect my assets. Ms. Isla is an artist of integrity and courage. She is an asset." "Are there any relevant questions? Perhaps about our Q4 earnings?" He had done it. The shocking move. He hadn't denied their connection. He hadn't hidden. He had doubled down, claimed her, validated her professionally, and simultaneously destroyed his enemy with cold, hard evidence. He hadn't just cleared her name. He had risked his own pristine CEO image to bind her to him, turning a liability into a declaration of power. Later that evening, she was summoned. The black Maserati was waiting. This time, when she arrived at the penthouse, the air was different. It was still clear. Marco was on the terrace, not in a suit, but in dark trousers and a simple black cashmere sweater. He was watching the sea. He turned as she approached. "You have," he said, "caused me a significant amount of trouble." Isla met his gaze. The fear was gone, replaced by a thrumming, complex understanding. "You seem to handle it." He allowed a small smile. "As I said, I protect my assets." He held out his hand, and it was her burner phone. "It is clean, my tech team wiped it." She took it. Then he held out his other hand. Resting in his palm was her emerald locket. The chain, which had broken when she'd rushed out of the penthouse, was repaired. The clasp was new, stronger. She looked at the locket, then at him. He stepped closer, and the distance between them felt charged, the air vibrating. He was no longer just a boss, no longer just a Mafia CEO. He was the man who had seen her, tested her, and when she tried to run, had refused to let her fail. "If you send me anything by mistake again, Isla," he murmured, his voice losing its controlled edge, becoming something rougher, more personal, "make it dinner plans." He was so close she could feel the heat radiating from him, see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes. She looked at this dangerous, protective, and utterly impossible man, and for the first time in her life, she did not feel the need to practice her confidence. She laughed, a genuine, unburdened sound that echoed on the terrace. "I'll have to see if I can fit you into my schedule, Mr. Verratti." He raised an eyebrow, the challenge accepted. She understood him now. She understood the power, the loneliness, and the loyalty. And with her eyes wide open, she chose him.